You are live.
Oh, I'm live. Good. Hi, everybody.
Thank
Out there
goodness.
in the cyber world. It's really great to see you. Thanks for joining us. My name is Holly Neer, and we're here to celebrate the release of a website called Because of a Song. I'm going to introduce it a little bit, and then we're going to talk to some of the guests who are on the line. I'm going to do first things first, just to get the questions out of the way. This is Cancer Hair. February, I was back east. I slipped in the ice and I broke my arm and my dislocated a shoulder and had surgery. Then I came back to California and got your standard colonoscopy to learn that I had a rare form of anal cancer. And so it's a very, very tough treatment, apparently one of the roughest that they administer. So I went through the chemo radiation and it was tough, brought me to my knees, in the midst of which I had a stroke. And then afterwards found out that the radiation had left fractures in my pelvis bone. So that's how come I look like this. I'm not trying to be Annie Lennox or anything like that. So, but we're amazing, our bodies, how we survive. So this website started out in 2019. I wanted to just put on film a conversation with Linda Tillery and Mary Watkins because we were all becoming older and I wanted to get their story on tape. Didn't know what would happen to it, but the interviews were so interesting that I just kept going. And as a result of when finally somebody said to me, you have to stop, there were 23 interviews. So we put them together in a website format, which I know is a little old fashioned, but it's designed like a gallery. So you come into the main room and there's sort of the introduction. Then you go to the photo gallery and then to a conversation room where all the interviews live. Then there's a listening room where there's playlists, and I'll talk about that more later. And then there's a reading room, which has a lot of resources. The playlist and the reading room go out beyond Oakland. The interviews stay kind of within the geography of Oakland and surrounding areas, because I realized that if I tried to do the whole state or the whole nation or the whole world, it was a bottomless pit that I couldn't even comprehend. But it turned out after the interviews that Oakland was kind of like a little Paris for lesbians. Gay men went to Castro, and it turned out that lesbians came to Oakland. And as Tess Hoover, who I'm going to introduce in a minute, said, it may not have been why we came to Oakland, but the music is why we stayed. It was glue. It was a way in which all of us connected with each other in a really special and unique way. So we're going to talk about that today. And as I understand it, my technology is a little minimalistic, but the web designer Kate Peterson, who you maybe can see in the Kate, can people see you or not? I don't know. There she is. She designed our website, which is just quite extraordinary. It's been really a pleasure to work with Kate. She's also a musician who works in a duo called Nervous But Excited, a name that I just adore. It's great. Tess Hoover, I think we can see you. Tess is a longtime friend of mine. She became sort of the tax accountant of choice in the lesbian community in Oakland. She was the go-to for both individual women artists and nonprofits. So she had a long history of understanding the Oakland world. And she came on and joined me to take over doing the photo gallery, which is just amazing. And she says that every single person she talked to said, but here are 5 others, and just kept sending her places to find more people. So hi, Tess, wherever you are.
Hi.
It's Tess. So there's quite a few people who are coming on slowly. There's Pat Hunt, who did all of the, what do you call it? The words that go under the pictures, what is that called?
Subtitle.
Subtitle, yes. Thank you for doing that. That was a long and tedious job. And as people come on, I will introduce. But Melanie Demore was one of the early people I interviewed, and she has to go to an airport soon. So let's start there, Melanie. Are you able to join me?
I am.
Oh, such an amazing artist, such a contributor to the Oakland culture, amazing voice. And I loved our interview In fact, I've gotten a couple emails back from people who have listened to that interview and were so moved by your vulnerability and how you articulated your thoughts. I would love to hear you talk a little bit about your experience in Oakland as a musician.
Well, it's so interesting. One of the reasons I came to Oakland was because before that, I was doing a little bit of touring. I was on tour with Castleberry and Dupree and Toshi. And I was living in Taos, New Mexico, and was thinking about where was I going to go next. And I was thinking about the East Coast, and Judith said, you might want to try Oakland. You might want to try, Northern California. I thought, well, oh, okay. And so that's kind of like what happened. And
why
huh?
for you when you got there? Why did you stay? What was unique about Oakland for you?
Well, one of the things that was unique about this is that there was all kinds of people here. And I had met a lot of different musicians because I met Brandy like in 1980 in Austin, Texas, because all of the lives stayed at the house. Yeah, stayed at the house that I lived in, which is where I first met Teresa Trell. I met all of the lives stayed at our house. That's where I met Linda and Mary Watkins.
Choose full names so that our observers know who we're talking about.
Yeah, so Linda Tillery, one of the most extraordinary musicians and founder of Linda Tillery and the Cultural Heritage Choir, of which I was blessed to be a founding member in that band. And Mary Watkins, just an extraordinary composer, pianist, and we perform together now. And, just that kind of influence and all of Alive. I mean, to be able to hang out with people like Rhiannon and Brandy, and this was all right here. And then E-Min, I hadn't been in Oakland in a long time. She said, I work with this youth chorus, and do you do stuff with choirs? And I said, yeah. So she took me down to, Mills. She was working at Mills College, which of course there's all of that. Rebecca Moleon is there. I mean, Pauline Oliveris. I mean, I'm like, where have I landed?
Yeah, Barbara Higbee was working at Mills too.
That's right. Yeah. So you have all of that, and it was a very welcoming community, and of course I ended up being on Redwood Records here.
Yes, you did.
I did, and I recorded it at the original IMA with June Millington.
Institute for Musical Arts.
In the same area. So, I mean, it was all here. And the collaboration was the part I loved too.
Yeah, big family tree here. Elizabeth, let me bring you in so that you and Melanie can talk together for a minute. This is Elizabeth Sejamin. Another one of the interviews that I did, it was just spectacular. She talked about her early days living in Mexico and then coming to San Francisco and applying to the Conservatory of Music, and became a major force working with the Women's Symphony, with choral groups, also became the artistic director of Redwood Records after I retired. So maybe Melanie and Elizabeth, you can talk some about what those larger choral and symphony organizations were like, because so often we learn about the soloist, but you all
right.
With lots
well,
of
with E, we've been able to touch on all those bases because I was on the staff of the Oakland Youth Chorus, which E was the artistic director at the time. The Cultural Heritage Choir did a concert with the Women's Orchestra, right? I mean, it's just all of those things. And then I was a recording artist on Redwood. So our constellations have touched for so many years, right, E?
Yeah, I think yours was the first recording when I came to Redwood as the artistic director that we did, I believe.
Oh, no kidding. I love that.
So that may be slightly fuzzy, but Melanie, I remember you had just come to town, and for some reason, I was hosting a Super Bowl party. That's a little fuzzy. This was a while back, and
that's the truth.
We got to talking, and you said, talking about singers and that you loved young singers, and the Oakland Youth Chorus at that time was all high school and community college students. And, I was looking for more conductors for the different choruses. So it was like, hey, do you want to think about working with the Oakland Youth Chorus? Not only fabulous singers, but fabulous humans. Being with the Oakland Youth Chorus changed my life, no doubt. So, and you said yes, and there you have it. I think it was
10 years I was with the OYC.
in Oakland or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know who won the Super Bowl, but you know.
Me either. Oh, I don't remember it at all but that was an auspicious day because I was staying with somebody who was a friend of yours who said, look, I'm going to a Super Bowl. And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yes.
And so I'm really glad that I did.
Yeah. I love you.
What was it like, Elizabeth, to try to pull together the women's symphony? What did you call it? The symphony or an orchestra? What was it?
Women's Philharmonic.
Philharmonic.
Well, you know, that was a true example of a village because it wasn't just me. Miriam Abrams, who was the managing director, Nan Washburn, who's still conducting, by the way, a champion of women composers and other composers, and she conducts the Michigan Philharmonic. So it was the three of us who did the Women's Philharmonic, and well, you know, it was a few things. It was like we learned how to raise money because it was an expensive project, an orchestra, paying all those players.
How many players was it? More or less?
Varied from concert to concert. I think the biggest, I don't know, something like 60.
Wow.
It varied. And the players themselves, once we all got in alignment about the fact that we were never going to play any music that anybody had ever played before, because we were going to play women composers, it's historical and contemporary. Once we all aligned to that, of course, the players were amazing, and the spirit carried the spirit of things. So it was an absolute collective group experience. I learned a lot about things I never knew about before. Just sort of went for it, you know, which we all did. And yeah.
I want to bring Tess in for a minute. Tess, do you mind chatting with this conversation? I know you might have to leave soon, but you did a lot of work with nonprofits because you became sort of our consultant of choice and having to deal with fundraising. Do you recall the early days of helping people understand how to raise money in nonprofits?
No, I sort of saw people after that process had happened, I think.
Yeah.
But I know how challenging it always was. I don't even know how people could do the thing they did. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And take on that. Now, usually there's one person who that's their job and that's what they do. That's nobody in our world could afford that kind of specific person in those days.
Yeah.
Sadly.
But you
Well, thank
remember
goodness
all
for
of
the
outlets. I mean, the thing that astounded me in some of these interviews that we did was realizing the bookstores, the brick hut, the women's centers, the women's buildings, that were a place for us to land and meet each other. And I think you worked at the women's bookstore. Is that right, Tess?
No.
Where were you working that you started to find? I'm sorry, I'm forgetting your geography here.
Where was I working? Where what?
A women's center. Were you at a women's center?
Oh no, actually, a bunch of us from my softball team started Women's Space, which was a little evening, Friday, Saturday night place where we had women play music, and during the day it was a senior meal center, free meals for seniors, and at night times we'd take it over. And at this, people from the East Coast would call. Alex Dobkin played there. It was a tiny little place. We made our own brownies. We took none of the door. We gave it all to the artists. That's where I met Nancy Vogel, the Berkeley Women's Music Collective. And then they go to the Full Moon in San Francisco and play. It was just, I had a little job as a bookkeeper there for the senior center, the meal center, and then just morphed from that. It's always sports involved, E-men. The softball team, the Super Bowl.
Yeah. But that's thank goodness for those spaces like Mama Bears, and Artemis and all those places that gave us a place to play.
Yes.
Every time I go down there and I go past where Mama Bears used to be, I just take a moment
Yeah.
and just because we lost Alice, so who's the owner, but I'm so grateful for those places.
Yeah.
There are a lot of them here in the
While
area.
we're talking about this, to express to the listeners who are tuned into this that none of this can happen unless somebody dares to do something they don't know how to do.
Exactly.
They open up a space, they say, come make music here.
Mhm.
I want to bring Carolyn in for a minute here, because when you first met Rhiannon and I think Suzanne Vincenza, it wasn't like there was a group called Alive. Can you talk about that first meeting and what you did, how that happened?
I think we fell in love with each other. Actually, we
Yeah.
met at this. It was a workshop in Haight-Ashbury Music, down in the basement of Haight-Ashbury Music in San Francisco, that was being run by Michelle Rosewoman, who's a really incredible avant-garde pianist. And she was doing a jazz workshop, and I think we were the only 3 people who showed up. And Rhiannon was singing at the time and also playing piano.
Mhm.
Suzanne was playing mostly cello. So
Mhm.
we had a lot of fun. We met, and then we decided that we would get together, outside of the class. So we started getting together, and we would just play away all afternoon. We go have coffee first. I had just moved down from Seattle, Washington. This was like 1975, 1976. Wasn't even a coffee drinker. But I went with the girls. I was like, yeah. And we would go back to, I forget whose house. Maybe it was my little apartment. I had an apartment on 18th and Castro, I think. And we would just wail away for hours on end. We kind of fell in love. And then we would meet like at least once a week. And after we had been getting together about 6 months, probably Rhiannon said, let's do a little gig somewhere. And you're talking about, coffee houses and places where women got their start. There was a little cafe that was just like kitty corner, I think, from where I live, called the Full Moon Cafe. Remember that one?
Yeah. Pretty.
Yeah, we had 6 songs and we did like 2 or 3 hours with the 6 songs. Piano. Rihanna was playing the piano, and I think by that time, Suzanne, yeah, for sure, she had also incorporated the bass, and I was playing the violin at the time as well. So I think we did a set, and then it was just nothing but drumming and women dancing wildly. But I don't know. And then something happened, the word got out that there's this trio.
Yeah.
And the first invitation really that we had was the National Women's Music Festival. Remember Jenny Clemens?
Jenny Clemens, yeah.
Jenny Clemens. She passed away too.
Oh.
Yeah.
But she was a friend of Rhiannon's. And so I think she and Rhiannon were talking about this great trio that Rhiannon was playing in. And so they invited us to National Music Women's Festival. And that was our first outing. And like I told you, Holly, we were in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
And
Well,
everybody.
that was happening a lot. I want to ask Melanie and Elizabeth to recall the program that I guess you instigated, Elizabeth, that happened every Thanksgiving. You know what I'm referring to?
At Redwood?
Yeah.
The New Spirituals Project, that one?
Right.
Yeah.
I think all of you at one time or another worked in that program. Can you sort of set the stage for that? And then maybe Carolyn and Melanie can remember how they related to it.
Well, we all, Carolyn and Melanie and I, and also Linda Tillery, we all did things together at the Oakland Youth Course. The Oakland Youth Course was kind of our laboratory because that was a group of people who will do anything. They will try anything.
Yeah, we would just say, and they go, okay.
Yeah. And so from that, when I went over to Redwood, started the New Spirituals Project, and Linda was my partner in that one. but Carolyn also, and Melanie recorded on Redwood and was, beloved to everything Redwood. And then Carolyn, we commissioned a wonderful full-length evening work from Carolyn called Skin Talk, which you made a wonderful recording that I have recently been listening to because your songs are timeless, Carolyn. And so, Redwood was a hub for all these things, and yeah.
Yeah, because we were doing a new
really made
spirituals
that happen.
project.
Oh, go ahead.
We were doing a new spirituals project also with connections with other composers. Mary Watkins did a whole series of songs for that. Ezai Barnwell, Bernice Johnson Regan did one. Jacqueline Rago. So yeah, and developing all of these different pieces, and we did a lot of stuff with Muse, the women's chorus in Cincinnati, and so it just spread all over but that goes back to Redwood's thing about supporting women's music and doing original music and really broadening the whole musical lexicon for people everywhere. So I was glad to be a part of that.
People
Well,
ask me about that. Yeah, they say, "Oh, it's Thanksgiving. Are you going to do those concerts?" And that was many years ago now. So it's the power of music, and particularly that music in the Black traditions, the musical traditions, that's so powerful. It's just in the bones. Yeah.
Well, and you brought that to Redwood Records, Elizabeth. I think before that, I was focused more on what was happening with Latin America. And then you moved in and took over the artistic director of Redwood Records. You started to really make it more local and really focused on the Black and Latin traditions that were coming out of the Bay Area itself. And I was so grateful for that. You really had a vision that
I always felt that Redwood
today,
was so much.
People remember it. I mean, they remember it.
Yeah, they really do. Yeah, including me. Really,
yeah. Is there anything like that going on now, or have people sort of forgotten how to do that? Do you know about what's happening now?
Well, Melanie's work, you're out there with all of it.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of different kinds of work, and of course I'm part of the Threshold Choir movement, of course, founded by Kate Munger, who founded the Threshold Choir over almost 25 years ago now. And this is a whole way of using your voice in song as a tool for healing. So if you call up members of Threshold, they will come to your house or the hospital or the hospice or call you up on the phone and sing for you and your loved ones. Cost you nothing. If you need somebody to come every day, 6 months, they'll do it. And so what I've found, is being a part of this community, the community in Oakland and the women's music family, it has given me the tools and also the support I need in order to be able to do what I do. Because without that community, I mean, you look around here. Yeah. I mean, for me in women's music, when I first heard Holly's first women's music album I heard was Mary's Something Moving, with her sitting on the stool, and I said, the reason I went, I said, that's a Black person on there. And I listened to that. And then there was, what's the one, the Unicorn song with Margie. And I'm like, this is some interesting stuff, And then when I was head chef at a restaurant in Austin, the only music that I played in the kitchen was Alive.
Wow.
It was just, my cassette was just kind of like on repeat. And that's what I listened to the whole time that I was there. So,
Melody, I remember meeting you. I remember meeting you for the first time. And also I remember when you first came to Oakland, I was playing percussion with the Oakland Youth Chorus, which was really fantastic. I remember you walking into that church and there you were in Oakland. I think you had just arrived. So I have really fond memories of that time with you too.
When I first met you in Austin, you had earphones on, which was really kind of an interesting thing back then. We're talking like 1980 or something. And you were playing and you were practicing. and you were playing your drum because you were all staying at our house at Canyon, and you just play. And Rhiannon had earphones on, and she was singing at the top of her lungs, and you're just bam, 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 bam. And I said, I love this. Yeah. So that was when I
just want
first.
to pause for a second to say that some of the people who are watching on the Facebook and YouTube is Margie Adam, who we just
Margie!
and we love Margie. She made a huge contribution to early women's music and as a pianist, and also went on to be a great organizer around the working with National Organization for Women and other groups like that to try to get the amendment passed for the to put women's rights and right to vote and everything into the Constitution. I remember that was great work. And also somebody just texting me that John Bucchino, a pianist that I've worked with for years, is watching. Susan Freundlich, who I was did amazing work around sign language. Kathy Fink, an amazing Jean Feinberg, jazz player. Irene Ferrara. Oh my goodness, Irene! I haven't heard.
Irene, I just love this. It's like a family reunion.
Yeah, and Bonnie Lockhart, Angela Wellman, an amazing.
So let's talk about jazz trombone and the incredible free school that she has set up.
Yeah, she's
here,
one of
the Oakland Conservative.
Yeah, yes. Listen to that interview. She's really amazing. Yeah. Eve Secular. Anyway, it's just so exciting to see these names, people popping in, and who are all such a big part of making this happen. Carolyn, can you talk for a minute about the drum school and about getting women drumming?
Oh, yeah. Well, at that time, back in the 70s, we weren't supposed to be doing that. I didn't really realize that until I heard it. That was one of those things that you just, you jump in.
You just did.
You naughty girl, you.
I got a lot of, I still walk into spaces sometimes and with guys drumming and they're like, let me show you how to do that, little lady.
Yeah.
That happened to me a couple months ago. I just have to laugh now because, it's been over 50 years. I've been playing like 50 some years. And it's just, but nowadays there's so many women playing. It's just so incredible and wonderful. And it's so natural and normal. I mean, I remember, I'm getting a memory, the first time I saw Edwina Lee Tyler on the Michigan stage with a group of all African-American women called A Piece of the World.
Oh, yeah.
Broke down and bawled my eyes out because it was like, why haven't I ever seen this before? I had already been playing drums for like 20 years or something, but you just never saw that, it wasn't in our, in our scope of a world view. But
and social media, the East Coast seems so far away for all of us too. 3,000 miles is like another country.
Yeah, thanks to Lisa Bogle and all the women that worked at the Michigan Women's Music Festival, we were able to meet. I'm sure that's true to meet other artists, like-minded artists, and I met a lot of great drummers from the East Coast, like Edwina, Nuru.
And did you know Waru Cleveland, who just passed away? She was the one that was head of the drum circle for the National Women's Music Festival for years. She just passed away a couple of weeks ago. Just brilliant. Brilliant.
And Lydia Mata, she was a player, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, can we talk about AAA? Annette Argentina Aguilar. Come on.
Now Annette is from the East Bay. She's from San Francisco.
Yeah.
I knew Annette when she was like 18 years old.
Oh, kidding.
She played in the Women's Philharmonic.
Yeah. Bad to the bone. She toured with me and Toshi and Judith and Jack.
Incredible. Yeah. She's got like 2 master's degrees. She's a student.
Yeah, she can play with her eyebrows. It's a trip,
Yeah.
Back in the day, there weren't so many women, and we didn't know each other. But, that has all changed. Believe me.
Festivals really helped with that. And a couple of weeks ago, I was on a Zoom with some young women who were working with a folk music organization, and they were quite emotionally sharing how hard it is for them to find one another. And when they're touring, about how they don't feel safe, they don't know whether it's okay to stay at a certain person's home. Staying at home saves a lot of money, but there's no, And I started talking to them about this network that we built back in the 70s about if the women were distributing the music, producing the concerts, then you knew that you'd be put in a safe home to stay overnight. You know, there was a network of people that you could count on, and that these festivals where you could go and meet people. And this was all before social media, so it had to be done in real time. And I really, I felt sad that they're starting from scratch again. And yet that's what we have to do. We have to keep building and then rebuilding and then rebuilding and doing it again and again and again to find each other and to create safe space for women to play.
Oh, Holly, it was all done at the highest level. At the highest level. Some of those concerts were the best production that we had.
Yeah.
You know, the best, like Michigan was just outrageous.
Off the charts. Yeah.
You know, was incredible, and all built by women. All built by women. Everything.
And these women were saying they were having a hard time, for example, when they go to a sound check, and just like you were saying, Karen, little lady, you know, fix your microphone. And they didn't have, somehow or other, we haven't been able to stay shoulder to shoulder with this next generation so that they could watch people like you deal with those kind of things. Because as we get older, we don't take it so personally. It's like an elder, you can sort of tap that guy on the shoulder and say, "Oh dear," you know.
Yeah, it's like I'm giving your mom, step aside, you know.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Holly, this project that you've been the visionary of, not only the visionary of, you actually saw it through all the ups and downs and ebbs and flows of creating something like this. That is so you to have the vision and then to see it through,
keep
all
it going
to high level. But this was all before So now that this is available, it's going to be available online. And all of this we're talking about, there was no internet. So a lot of this history may have been lost.
Yeah.
But now it's more available for people. And like you're saying there, E, that they'll be able to check out these things and to go, wow, so this is possible. It has been done and we can do it again.
Yeah.
In these 23 interviews, you're all so extraordinarily personal and vulnerable and articulate. And I hope that it's a deep dive. You know, it's not, you can't kind of go in and see it in 10 minutes. Each interview is at least an hour and there's 23 of them. So it's something that will take a while to investigate. But I hope that it leaves a trail of what we built in the 70s and the 80s that was so spectacular. That really was, and across all the genres. I mean, from what your work was, Elizabeth, to what Carolyn did, from what Melanie did, and people who aren't here to talk about it, but they did tell their stories. And then people like Susan Fraser at Goldenrod, who's been such a long-standing supporter of distributing our music and doing artist support, and Lady Slipper,
absolutely,
our music, and they created a production network of producers all over the United States and Canada.
Exactly. And thank goodness for all of those people and the managers and the bookers and all of that, because it was such an incredible network for us to, all we had to do was do our music. And folks, you know, they really, really looked after us and had a network. Otherwise, how would we have even been able to get out there?
All we had to do was do our music and drive from place to place.
That's it.
Well,
eat a lot of bagels.
That was a lot of work.
eat a lot of bagels and you know, all of those things. And but it was worth it. I know that I would be less of Melanie DeMore without it. I'm more myself because of it.
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw all of you, and of all the people you've mentioned so far, Holly, I remember, you know, the first time I saw anybody, and all in here in the Bay Area, everything changed my life. Absolutely all of it, without a doubt. Yeah.
You remember the first time you saw Sister Boom? Sister Boom just cracking it at Pride. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's just
so
electrifying.
Yeah.
With 125 drummers, I think, at the height.
It was electrifying.
Tell us about Sister Boom, Carolyn.
Yeah.
Sister Boom was really just an incredible group. And it just, you know, I passed it on to Mara Stevens, a wonderful percussionist. and she just retired from the group. So I think finally it's kind of being retired. Who knows? It'll probably be resurrected at some point. But and I think it was 81. I was touring still with Alive, and I thought it was Gay Day, and I thought was coming up, and I thought, oh, it'd be so great to have a group of women out there playing. So I just put the word out. Like you said, there's no internet. So we had our first rehearsal at Aquatic Park, and like 60 women showed up.
I remember that.
Yeah, this is happening. And our first logo was, our first chant was, on the one, in the pocket. You should try it. Don't knock it.
That's some funky stuff right there.
Yeah,
baby.
girl.
I remember that year, Carolyn, I marching next to you and having one of the big drums, and I was like, wow, this drum is heavy after all these many blocks. And you just let the music carry you.
Aww. Yeah.
Got into a trance, and we marched all the way from the Embarcadero, down at the bottom of Embarcadero, all the way up to the, what is it? Center? No, where the Capitol is over there. Civic Center.
The Civic Center. Oh yeah.
It was a long way, but the people they were just so. I mean, they started cheering, and as we marched, it would grow in number because everybody wanted to jump in and march with the boom. So. And we did a lot of other things too. I remember the Democratic National Convention that happened. I can't remember. There must have been 84. And we marched from the Castro down to Moscone Center. And a circle of people joined, put their arms around us so that we could march without everybody jumping in to the band. It was just phenomenal. It was like, it was really, and then we did a lot of the Dyke marches. That was phenomenal. It was incredible. That was.
I would always love Sister Bill, but you can see the influences. When I was coming here, Holly, through San Francisco, and it happened to be on the day of when Harvey Milk was killed.
Oh,
and so I was walking through the airport, and they have that beautiful exhibit about him, and all in my head was, "We are a gentle." And that's what was going on in my mind as I'm looking at this. And I remember us doing something together years ago at one of the commemorations, but that kind of thing about how much music and song is just, if we're aware of it, how it surrounds us. And of course, your music is like that, but I was just coming here 2 days ago and that happened. Yeah. And it just came on and I'm looking at all of this.
Can't always know what the effect of what we're each doing is going to have. You just have to do it. I mean,
yes.
You can't figure out in advance, well, is this right or is this important or is it whatever? If you just follow your heart. I mean, that song doesn't really belong to me anymore. It's just really a song that belongs to community. And I love that it's used both in celebration on Gay Pride Days, but also when there's a trauma and the killings that have happened at gay bars. And people just pull it out. It's singable and it unifies people, and it has a life.
It's the medicine that people need at various times.
Yeah. I wanted to point out that Emma's Revolution is on the I don't know if they're YouTube or Facebook, and Debbie Fire, but wonderful.
Another great percussionist.
My sister Timothy, who with sign language, and I want to tell that story. Also, Donna Coronas, who was with Ronnie Gilbert and
one of the best managers out there.
I also want to just tell people you can post your questions on Facebook or YouTube, and the Susan Frazier is keeping an eye on it, and she will text me your questions if there's anything that you would like us to respond to. I want to talk a little bit about sign language. My sister Timothy, when we were living together in Los Angeles in the, 70 something or other, and she came home from work and she said, would you like me to sign one of your songs? Would you like to see your song? And she had been working with the National Theater of the Deaf, an extraordinary company. And if you'll notice in the title, it's not National Theater for the Deaf, it's National Theater of the Deaf. And they went out and performed for both hearing and non-hearing people all over the place. And they really introduced to the world the integrity and the image of deaf people being complete, whole, creative, articulate people, and presented a language that was extraordinarily clear and really had to go against the grain of people you might have seen in the subway with little cards selling a deaf sign for $1 or something. You know, the whole image that there was there was no community. And they changed that through theater. And they were amazing theater company. And so my sister Timothy was working with them as one of the hearing actors who would voice, because not all of their families and not all the people who went to see the theater knew sign. So she signed one of my songs. She signed "You've Got Me Flying." And I was so taken back by the whole thing that I wanted to share it with my audience. So from time to time, when she was anywhere nearby, I would invite her on the stage to do this one song. But eventually, we met people like Susan Freundlich, who said, you know, it doesn't really help deaf people if you only sign one song. If you really want to make this accessible, you have to do the whole thing. And Timothy had other plans, and she didn't want to go on the road with me, but finally convinced Susan to. And we did a tour, several tours, where she signed an ASL the whole concert. And for a while, deaf people came because it was unusual, and especially deaf lesbians, because they were not having access to what we're all talking about, the lessons we were learning from one another through culture and through music and through poetry. And they felt kind of left out. In fact, I remember somebody said to Susan, pointing at the Chris Williamson record at Susan's house, The Changer and the Chain, what's on that? And why is everybody so excited about it? So she sat down and signed the whole record to her deaf friend. And so this accessibility of lesbian consciousness and lesbian ideas really took off for a while. And then eventually there were deaf people who felt like, okay, I got that now. I don't really want to go to concerts anymore. But the bigger outcome, in addition to that, was how many hearing people fell in love with the language and learned the language and went into deaf services. So that was really amazing. They're working in hospitals and as legal teams. And then we met Candace Barnes in Washington, D.C., and she works at Gallaudet. And she's taking this to the next step of how people she's teaching ASL to have got to become culturally sophisticated, because when you're signing something, there is a level of cultural understanding that's required in order to know how to interpret. So, for example, a young interpreter was signing an elder Black man telling his story, and he said, "My father was a sharecropper," and the signer said, "My father was a farmer." So not at all what was being intended by the language. Candace is working a lot at Gallaudet to talk about cultural intention. And it's very exciting to see that this is just keeps growing and getting bigger and more important as we go.
Yeah. I used to travel with my own interpreter when I in Oakland, and it was really important to me. And that way, you know, she always knew all my stuff. And so
knew exactly what you meant. Yeah.
Exactly. And I would always have my interpreter stand right next to me.
Yeah.
There
was also a joke around interpreters when at the festivals of who got assigned to do Farron.
Yeah.
Her poetry is so abstract sometimes, and they're just sitting there going, you know, what is she saying? But it's
ain't life a brook. Really.
How do you explain that? You know, it's not part of your language.
Yeah.
So, Elizabeth, what are you doing now?
So now I'm a consultant and an executive coach. I work with NGOs a lot in the global South and on communications and facilitation and just supporting them in different ways, people working on human rights and climate justice. And I also work with documentary filmmakers at New Day Films. Julia Reichardt, one of our pioneer, feminist filmmakers, just passed away.
That's right.
And I just, before this, heard Michael Moore's audio blog give her such a tribute because they're both from Ohio and she was very influential to him. So I've been working with them for a long time. So I'm very privileged to get to work with people from around the world because I've learned so much from these activists. Yeah.
That's great. And you, Carolyn, where are you?
I moved to Philadelphia, which seems like a shock. Why would I move from Oakland? It was incredible. But, I lived in a house with my sister friend, Delia Rodriguez, and her son passed away, and he lived in the house as well. And it was a big house with 2 floors. And I lived in the bottom, they lived on top. And he was only 34 years old, and he suddenly passed, actually December 2nd, 2019. And Odelia and I owned the house together. And it just, of course, she wanted to leave that house. She couldn't live there anymore. And for me too, it was difficult to come home. It was tragic. It was a tragic. Uh,
Mhm.
so, so we
And now
sold
you're
the
being a
house.
grandma.
Yeah, we sold the house, and my son kept saying he's living in Philadelphia. He kept saying, "Come to Philadelphia, Mom." I had a grandbaby who I adore, and you know, let's get a house so they can move to a better neighborhood. Their neighborhood was a little iffy, with drugs and things like that in the neighborhood. So I said, okay. So I moved to Philadelphia, and so now I've got my grandson and my son and my daughter-in-law, and we have a big house in Philadelphia. I am still drumming. It was during COVID. Word of advice, never move during a pandemic.
Yeah.
Because you can't meet anybody. So I'm just
Well,
starting to really meet the music community and doing some projects. I'm doing a project that's in New York, and so it's kind of fun. It's kind of fun actually. It's meeting new people and playing drums over there. Once I met the drummers, I felt like, yes, I've landed finally.
mm.
So and still doing Born to Drum here in the summers, and that's
So will
huge.
you post, or I don't know how to do this exactly. Maybe tell Susan at Goldenrod, text her, but somehow we want to post how people can find out about that summer program and how they can come and attend
There's a
it.
Facebook page. There's a Facebook page called Born to Drum.
Born to Drum. There you are.
And
Yeah.
it's wonderful. I got
Melanie
to be
Kay,
part of it.
so great.
There's
Elizabeth comes.
teachers
Mhm.
from all over the world. Deidre McCullough just came on to the
Yay!
network. Yeah, it's great to see her name. Again, people, you could post questions if you have any, because we're going to wrap up pretty soon. Some of the other people that were interviewed in this website, it's called Because of a Song. You can go to it, becauseofasong.com. And in addition to the people you're seeing now, June Millington and Ann Hackler were interviewed, Linda Tillery, my sister Timothy Neer and Candace Barnes talk about the history of ASL. Nikki Randall is one of the people, Patrice Tumas, who's a salsa keyboard player, and Lakota Hardin, an indigenous artist. So that there's just a wonderful array of people who have very different stories to tell. Judith Castleberry is interviewed. So I hope people will go there and allow themselves to sink into it. The photo gallery that Tess Hoover designed has got, I don't know, hundreds of photos of people from the Bay Area, from Oakland. Then when it gets to the conversations are Oakland based, but when it gets to the playlists and to the reading room, it expands out into the country. We only just barely skimmed the surface. It's amazing. There's like 6 playlists and over 100 songs on every playlist, going back to women who came before us, who maybe weren't able to sing feminist songs, but had to survive what it meant to be a female artist in pre-feminist music. Then there's 2 different, it's Spotify as well as SoundCloud, 2 different places you can go to hear the lesbian feminist music that came out of women's music. And Susan Frazier from Goldenrod did some really good work at finding some of the songs that wouldn't have usually been available, found out from these people's families, or, is it okay for her to put it up on SoundCloud, like songs from BB Caroge, for example. Wonderful
Maybe.
early band in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
And there's songs of artists who did go into the mainstream and took feminism with them, very bravely crossing those borders. And then the last one is new young artists who are continuing the tradition in a very different way than the way we did. When I listened to all of it, I thought, my God, some of it was really hard for me to comprehend, but I was I hung in there, and it's not over. Women are speaking for themselves, and speaking boldly carries on, and a great tradition. And then I know Pat's been on the Zoom. I just wanted to thank him for doing a lot of behind the scene work with, I need an editor, and I need someone who corrects my punctuation and my spelling, and also who did a lot of work with the captions. So thank you, Pat, for doing that. The kind of behind the scene work that made all of this website possible. And originally, a group called the Understory, two young people who were filmmakers who helped film the original interviews, and then Helene Rosenbluth, who did some additional interviews, and my nephew Lucas Verbrugge, who was kind of one of the first people that I spent talking about this, trying to figure out what it was. And it was helpful to have a next generation person and a white male to talk it through, to kind of get a response from someone who didn't have this experience at all, but was raised by radical women. That was fun. But then we had three extraordinary photographers who gave us so much material. Sandra Morris, Irene Young, and Jerry Rubino, all who contributed hundreds of photos without charging us for them. They were the documenters so much of what went on in the Bay Area. Okay, here comes a question. Is Holly Near a Brandi Carlile fan? Sure, why not? How many women singers, including Holly, speaking to today's divided world? Or how are women singers speaking to the divided world? Melanie, you want to talk about that?
Well, I can tell you that one of the things that I'm doing, and it's part of my work these days, there is a huge movement on this planet, and I work with a lot of choirs and a lot of singers and all that are swallowing the Kool-Aid that says you must only sing music from your own culture. Now, I think that is poison. To me, that goes right along with let's not look at critical race theory. Let's not look at gender things. Let's act like nobody else exists. We don't want to be itchy. And to me, that is poisonous, because what is the biggest thing in the world that connects all of us together is our songs. And I'm not talking about the sacred music and the things that we do in terms of ritual, but I'm talking about the songs that different people sing in community, that teaches the community, that gives them songs of strength. If we don't sing each other's music, it is a slippery slope. And so that is a big thing in mine. It's like making sure that you connect to this music humanly, because what's one of the things that connects us together is music. So I'm letting people know, I said, now you need to realize that you think that you're doing one thing, but really you're doing the opposite. It's like saying, I don't see color. I said, don't say that to me. I know you think you're saying one thing, but really what you're doing is disappearing me. By only staying in your lane, that means you don't acknowledge any. So it gives us a chance to talk with each other. It gives us a chance to get to know each other better. But what better thing for the far right than to have us not singing each other's music? What better way to keep us separate from each other? To me, it's like not only are we drinking the Kool-Aid, but we're holding up the pitcher and stirring it around with the ladle. We must sing each other's songs, so that means we have to sit in the same space and talk about these things. How do we feel it? Because all of those songs are about the human experience. Those are the songs we need to share.
How do you speak, Melanie, to people, if we're going to sing other people's songs? What is the homework that needs to be done?
The homework is you sit and you talk about the music and not sing it from the inside out, because all of those songs that we have in our collective memories and our cultures are songs about how to be a good human being, how to survive, how to thrive. These are all things that all human beings need to know. You got to say, how do you connect to the music? That's the thing to me. But we sit down and say, okay, this is how it came from, but every culture everywhere has this is a song that we sing when we're feeling bad. This is a song that we sing when our kids take their first step. This is a song that we sing when somebody dies. Well, since we all take first steps, we all die. And we all need, you know what I'm saying? Those are the songs that need to be shared. And if we don't do that, that is like, I can tell you, I can see the conservative right people going, they think they're doing that, but they're doing what we want them to do because they don't want us to be connected to each other. Don't fall for it. And those of us, I have people say, I don't know about, we're worried about singing spirituals. I said, hold up. I am a 4-star card carrying Black person. You call me up, I will come, I will talk to your board of directors and we will talk about that music. But don't do this because you're just disappearing all of us. So that's what I'm doing.
Thank you. Here's a question, Carolyn, for you. Are you doing any public gigs in New York City? Because you mentioned you have a project there.
I'm working on a project with a woman actually in New Jersey, Nicole Wines, and she's doing a project called Raices. And she's bringing a lot of different women together that play different drums from different cultures, and she's making a video. I haven't done any public I played at Sister Space, last summer, and that was terrific. I just had the best time. And that's been about it. Yeah.
Where would you post if you were going to do public workshops or perform again? How do people find that out?
On Facebook.
You're on Facebook.
Yeah.
Good.
And
I'm
also,
sorry, Hall, I'm going to have to go.
Bye, Melanie. Have a good
It's so
trip.
good to see all of you, and I love you.
bye, Mel. Love you, love you, love you forever.
Safe travel.
Got you, Hall. You know that.
Fly
Huh?
safe.
Elizabeth, can you take this one? It's sort of like, let's see, talk about singing lesbian or feminist songs, how you all had to fight for those spaces and what pushback and or support you got.
Well, I think pushback was always there, but what overrode it so much was the community. Yeah, because I think everybody, whether on the stage or in the audience, is experiencing tremendous pushback in whatever field or whatever community of work or life they were in. And that was one reason everybody was gathering at these events. And so there was a lot of pushback. I mean, I remember always being, told with an interviewer, like, you'd meet me and say, oh, I thought you'd be tall and blonde, things like that. So there was pushback everywhere for everybody, but there was something about gathering around the music. It just overrode that. And it may have only been for a few hours at a time, but the lasting effects, kind of the anticipation of going to the concerts, being at the concert, and then all the afterglow of carrying that concert and the music forward. And I mean, hats off to Goldenrod and Lady Slipper. I know when I was at Redwood, if they weren't there distributing, that would have been a really tough go. So that people we could have the music at home and pass it on.
There was something too about when you were in an audience of predominantly women and we weren't thinking about the pushback, we were thinking about our lives together. It created a new normal for me inside. I went, oh, this is what healthy looks like. Now I may go outside and come up against things that aren't healthy, but I'll now remember what healthy looks like. And that's what I'll work towards in my life and in my music. Carolyn, did you?
Yeah, the music changed people's lives. I mean, it changed their lives. A lot of women came out because of this music. They were in bad relationships, they were getting beaten up, and they had the courage to come out and go and seek other women, for support. I mean, it changed people's lives. Black women came to the forefront and were supported, and we were able to hear about their lives and see, their cultural offerings from a woman's perspective, from a woman's perspective. It was really profound. It's profound what the music has done.
And then we had to just be brave enough to respond. Like I remember Wendy Waldman, singer-songwriter in Los Angeles, and I tried to do a double bill at the Troubadour, which is kind of a big music club down there. And they wouldn't let us because they said you can't have two women on a double bill. it has to be a female with a male comic, or it has to be, but they wouldn't let a double bill. So I wasn't sophisticated enough at the time to argue that. Next time it came around, it was Chris Williamson and I wanted to do a double bill. And they said it again, you can't have two women. And we said, why? And they said, yeah, but who would go first? I said, really, that's what's holding it up, is who would go first? Well, we were booked for 2 nights. I said, one of us will go first one night, and one of us will go first the other night. And we sold those concerts out to the hilt. And I think money talks. It proved to them that there was an audience for this music and that nobody was sitting there worrying about who was going first. So Chris and I did these 2 shows. Meg Christian came up and sang some songs with us. And it established in Los Angeles among the producers that there was an audience for this feminist and lesbian music. And they were there hanging from the rafters. And we just sort of had to plow through every one of those little obstacles that came along. I did one show I did several shows, but one of the shows I did with Meg Christian, this group of men came together backstage afterwards, and they were a men's group. And they said, we've always followed your music. We've really loved coming and learning about feminism and changing our own lives. We talk about it a lot in the men's group, but we feel like tonight, it was the first time we've come to a show that felt anti-male. And I said, what part of this felt anti-male to you? And we looked at the set list. I pulled out the set list and went through all the songs. And I said, I think what you're feeling is that you just weren't included. We didn't mention men at all, and it came across to you as hostile just because you weren't the center of attention. And their mouths dropped over and they said, oh my God, we've got to go back to our men's group and work on this. We just totally blew it. We missed the whole point. So there were these men out there who were really trying to understand it and not bring their old pattern habits to it. But those were the kind of things that when we were strong, I had a platform that I could talk to these guys, but I imagine if one was in a small community somewhere and you got, I'm trying to remember, it was a concert in Boston in Cambridge, and it was women only concerts, two nights for a women only audience. And some group of lawyers at Harvard decided to use this as a test case, and they accused us of discrimination. So they were all sold out. So we had to find some way to sell. I think that the mandatory number was we had to find a way to sell 6 tickets to men. So 6 men who were in solidarity with us went and bought the 6 tickets and gave them to women so that it continued to be a women-only concert. But these were the things we came up against, and you just had to take them in stride, as I recall, because if we let ourselves get really emotional about it, we would fall prey to the negativity that was out there. You just had to sort of checklist. Okay, we went through that one. We went through that one. Let me look and see if there's other questions about here. Any recommended women's vocal ensembles in Los Angeles? Yes, and my age is blanking out. I know what they're called, and I know Sue Fink has a mixed chorus in Los Angeles.
Fabulous chorus.
What's the women's chorus?
Angel choir. Angel. I think it's called the Angel Chorus.
The Sue Fink chorus is. The women's vocal chorus is. Oh, the director's going to hate me because I've actually guest sung with them, and I'm just totally blanking out. Maybe while one of you talking, I can look it up. But there's another question here. Who or where did you get your musical inspiration? And did any of you try to approach the mainstream record companies with your music? Do either one of you want to talk about that?
Well, my I have to say, for drumming, my musical inspiration comes from Cuba. It still does. Because the conga drum, which is the instrument that I'm totally in love with still today, was created in Cuba. It was developed from an African drum and created in Cuba, the conga drum that we know it. And it's pretty unbelievable. So I got a lot of inspiration from outside of the country. A lot of inspiration here in the country too, by people's stories. I'm inspired by you, Holly. Totally. I'm totally and have been for, God, I don't know, since the mid 70s. And I'm inspired by you, Elizabeth, because you're so visionary in your thoughts. I mean, when I talk to you, I get so inspired because you're saying things I would never have considered or thought of before. So that
We
inspiration is
inspired
all.
each other a lot and learned, there was racism, there was class discrimination, there were gender issues in women's music. It wasn't like this clean ride at all. And we had to work through all of those things in a small microcosm in the same way the world at large has to work on it. But there was something nice about working on it within the context of a lesbian feminist music, because it made it a smaller circle in which to have these struggles. And there was this love and respect. And there was the fact that we were, many of us sleeping with each other. It sort of made it very intimate and very personal. You couldn't just dismiss it and go, oh, what the hell? You kind of had to work it out. And I think a lot was learned within the context of this movement. I just looked it up. Vox Femina is the vocal group in Los Angeles that I think is, and there's also something called West Coast Singers. Okay. So let me see if there's any other questions here.
I want to say something that, we're looking back sort of in a way at a time in space, in a way, in history, and a lot of really great things happened, really incredible development of all of us in our community. But I want to say feminist and the equality of women is a work in progress. It's like so slippery and so fragile at times, and not to be forgotten that we're still all working on this idea of equality for women in all of the professions, and so it's like democracy. There was just somebody who said that we won't name, that just said we should get rid of the
Constitution.
But
well, that's a good idea.
All of us in our work are confronted with all these issues over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And moving forward, and we're trying to honestly help younger women have support and community. And I think the work you're doing here, Holly, hopefully it'll be an inspiration to them, like you said. But this is,
and we learned from them. I mean, Black Lives Matter is such an amazing, and the Me Too movement, the environmentalists, the young people who are sitting in trees and standing, riding boats to stop the killing of whales. And I mean, there's a bravery out there.
There's so much going on. I'm so hopeful. I have the privilege of really getting to work with feminists and activists from the global South outside the US. And let me tell you, these people are rocking it around everything. I was just with a group of people in Costa Rica for a week, people that I work with who are doing such amazing leadership on all these issues. So I am hopeful at this moment. I mean, the United States may be going through a lot of big adjustments, but so have a lot of other countries, and we got to stick together. We just, we just must stick together. We will see our way through these things because we have in the past, and we will, and we, are opening to activists and leaders from other places is going to help us a whole lot, because a lot is going on out there. That's incredible work. Yeah.
I think also we think that activism started in the 60s. It's been going on for hundreds of years. There have been people who have been picking away at injustice and this stuff. We come from a long tradition of people who put themselves out there bravely, and whether it was witches burned at the stake for believing in women's medicine. I mean, it just isn't recent. And it's kind of like you wake up in the morning and you decide, a spectrum of extraordinary human beings and terrible reflection of humanity, where do you want to stand? I mean, and that can change over a lifetime. You maybe sort of just backpedal a little bit here, and then all of a sudden something happens in one's life and you become a leader and become really a progressive speaker, singer, whatever. It's not static, as you have both just said. We're going to wrap up pretty soon, but somebody asks, how is Linda Tillery? She's wonderful. She has health problems, which many of us do. Someone says, how was my health? Well, I started the program out, which you might have come in a little bit late. I had cancer and I'm on the other side of the treatment and I'm doing fine. So thank you for that. Linda's had a lot of different health issues, but she continues to show up at the Freight and Salvage and sing and perform. She continues to be a leader. And when I was doing this thing, I can't tell you how many of the people in the interviews said that when they first came to California, someone said to them, well, you need to meet Linda Tillery. She was the anchor in Oakland that everybody needed. And she was also part of a women of color softball team. So whichever door you wanted to go through, you ended up, you got to find Linda Tillery. So she's doing great. And thanks for asking about that. And someone said, would you announce the other webinar I'm doing? There's a man named John McAuliffe who works on trying to articulate what happened in Vietnam so that people can learn from that in the same way that this site is trying to articulate what happened in some part of women's music so that we don't lose that. So he's putting together films and lectures and policy and everything so that people can really study a war that took so many people's lives. And so he asked me to put together a section on the music that came out of it. And the first one was that they already did was with Peter Yarrow, Sunny Oakes, Phil Oakes' sister, and Reggie Harris. And this one, I learned from Linda Tillery at a show she did at the Freight that there was Black protest music during that period of time that doesn't usually get called anti-war protest music. It's not Pete Seeger, it's not Phil Oakes, it's not Country Joe McDonald, all of which were writing predominantly from a white male's perspective of getting drafted and being sent over to be killed. So this is music that comes out of the Black tradition. And I'm going to have to try to find the link. It's tomorrow. And maybe Susan or Kate, you're watching, you can text me the link so that I can, or put it up on the Facebook. But it's Linda Tillery, Chris Matthews, and I talking about protest music that came out of the Black community. And it was different from writing about the draft. It was really about how the money that's spent by the military industrial complex to go and kill people that we don't know. These soldiers who were over there had never met these people. Vietnamese had never done anything harmful to them. And how that war and that expenditure of funds ended up creating extraordinary poverty in Black communities and led to more strife and complexities. So that's what the conversation's about. And I guess they just said they put the link in the chat already. So I hope that y'all can take a listen to it. It's very interesting. Linda and Chris are both great. So because of song.com, take a deep dive. Please let your gender studies classes in your area know about it. Let the libraries and the museums you're around know about it, because we want this to be there available for researchers. I can't tell you how many requests I get a year from people who are doing their term papers, either in high school, college, or grad school, about women's music, and they're asking me all these questions. And now I can say, well, here, take a look. This is what happened in Oakland. And if you're from other places, share your stories in the community part of the Facebook page so that we keep leaving a trail. It's really important to tell your story in any kind of way that you can. Maybe have coffee klatches after this and record them or film them to talk about what women's music and lesbian feminist music did in your community and for you all. This isn't the end, it's just the beginning. Elizabeth, thank you so much for joining. Carolyn, it was just wonderful to see you. Pat, thanks for hanging out. Susan Frazier and Kate Peterson, there's Kate's picture, for being in the background and helping this all go on. And I love you all so much. Have great holidays.